Is this on now? Okay, yes. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Inglewood City Council study session. Jumping right into it, we do have a full agenda tonight. Our first agenda item is the job fair update. This is an informational item for Council, Business Service, and Economic Development Engagement Manager Susie Miller from Arapahoe Douglas Works is present to discuss the upcoming Inglewood Job Fair. Also present is Darren Hollingsworth, Head of Economic Development here for the city.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of City Council. It's my pleasure this evening to introduce Susie Miller from Arapahoe Douglas Works. Arapahoe Douglas Works and the City of Inglewood struck a partnership very early on in terms of surveying our business community to see if there was demand for a job fair in Inglewood, and the results came back very positive in support of a job fair. And this matter was talked about at ACE a little bit, and they deemed the idea to be very supportive of both the residents and the businesses alike to have direct benefits to both. At this time, I'll turn over the microphone to Susie Miller. Thank you, Susie.
Thank you. Good evening. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say this has already been a really fun adventure, partnering not only with the city but with the chamber as well, and looking at opportunities to both support businesses and job seekers in this community. So our first real task was identifying whether there would be a need and the best time to be promoting an event. And so we did a survey, and we've received responses from over 60 businesses in the Inglewood area, and the vast majority of those certainly supported that they would be hiring within the next 6 months, and that September would be a good time for a job fair. So that's when we really started looking at dates and opportunities. It's really in alignment with Arapahoe Douglas Works in terms of September is Workforce Development Month, so this is an activity that certainly made sense, and it was within alignment of all of the activities that we wanted to do that month. So we have set a date of September 29th, the morning of, to conduct a job fair. And we're really gracious that we're going to be able to host it right here in this space. We think that at a minimum we'll probably be able to get at least 30 employers into this space, and using this space along with some of the lobby area as well. And this is something certainly that AD Works does on a regular basis, so we feel that our processes are already kind of in line to be able to get all the employers registered, kind of handle all of the coordination of that setup. And then of course we have over 34,000 registered job seekers that would be interested in working in the Arapahoe Douglas area. So we'll certainly be using not only our resources but all throughout the metro area to spread the word about this event. Certainly the goal is to focus on Inglewood-centric businesses, both large and small, those primary employers, primary job creation employers in our targeted industries. So we'll make sure that we're vetting those companies to make sure. I think we talked about maybe some businesses might have a Inglewood zip code but might not actually be located here, so we want to make sure that we're keeping the priority to the businesses that are located here, and we feel like this is going to be the best way to meet their needs. Certainly based on the responses of that survey, with 47 businesses saying that they would absolutely attend a job fair in September, we don't think we will have any difficulties recruiting businesses to fill the space. And certainly if we wouldn't, we'd have a kind of a priority list or backup list of additional areas that could attend the event. But we want to make this a high quality event, and I think what we've demonstrated this partnership so far, I think everything should run relatively smoothly. I think the support with the library being able to offer computer space for job seekers to fill out applications. So we've already talked about a lot of those planning logistics, even down to where applicants can fill out applications if they're filling out paper applications here at the event. So we're just really excited to be able to partner with you all and offer this service to the Inglewood businesses.
Thank you. We're excited. Questions from council? Linda.
We're just started these. Ooh, I think this one is on. Thank you for working with us on this, and I know the chamber is really excited about this, as I've heard them chattering about for the last several months. question for those who might not be able to come that day. Could they access the information from that day very easily or through some process?
We'll certainly have a list of all of the employers that will be attending the event prior to, and we'll have that up on our website and share that readily. And then, always encourage them to be registered in our statewide job database, Connecting Colorado.
The other question would be, what would you like from us? What could we do to be of help?
Well, I think the main thing is this space. It's anytime that we search to hold multiple employer events, space is always at a premium. So we look at this as a real opportunity. There's coordination. We've already discussed coordination of efforts to have liaisons here to make copies for businesses if they need more applications made. And some of those logistics we've already worked out. And then certainly the vetting of the businesses and making sure that we're identifying those priority employers that we want to ensure that are here.
Other questions from council? Amy?
Yeah, thank you. This is really exciting. Do we have a plan yet on how we're going to get the word out to potential job seekers?
Sure. Like I said, we have over 34,000 just registered that want to work in the Arapahoe Douglas area. So we'll be promoting that out through all of our networks. So not only through that statewide database, so we have mechanisms to send out mass blasts, but then all of our partner workforce centers will also be distributing information as well. Of course, our marketing through our website and those resources. Usually for this type of event, we'll also do some sort of press release prior to the event.
It might be worth mentioning the veterans component as well.
Oh, yes, definitely. That's we try to ensure priority of service for veterans. So how we've kind of structured this is we imagine that the first half hour to hour will be dedicated time for veterans only. And so they'll get the first shot at all of those businesses, which we get nothing but positive feedback when businesses know that they get a chance to look at veterans first. So that's always a really good partnership. So then you have all of those networks too, all of the veteran networks that are promoting job search assistance to their customers. We'll get the word out to all of them as well.
Awesome. And I assume we're going to put it in our citizen newsletter in September?
We will plan on marketing the event through our channels as well, that being the citizen newsletter, Facebook, etc. So.
Certainly that's also where the Chamber has resources as well to help promote the event. That's why it's, I think, a really beautiful partnership.
Yeah, I think this is a really exciting thing coming to the city. We haven't historically done a great job with matching our local residents with local job opportunities, so hopefully this can help. I think that we do need to kind of also take the lead in marketing this to our own, in our own channels, the website, the citizen press release, all these type of things to make sure that we're doing our best to market this to our local residents, because it sounds like you did a pretty good job on outreach of local businesses, but also local residents who might not be part of your list there.
Sure.
But again, we're very excited. So, any further questions or comments from council? Thank you again for coming this evening.
Thank you.
I'll see you on the 29th. Okay, let's moving on to agenda item 2. This is the EAF discussion. Attorneys Mike Miller and Steve Rickles from Berman. Sorry, not sure. Thank you. And Tom Peltz and Kutak Rock are here as well to discuss EAF. Please join us. Welcome. Thanks for coming down this evening. If you wouldn't mind maybe starting us off with an introduction, or and we'll return the favor.
My name is Mike Miller. You're not the first one that has difficulty with our firm name. Don't feel badly.
Thank you for that. You're too kind.
I am Steve Rickles, also from Barrenbaum Wine Shack.
Excellent. Who's going to kick us off on an intro? Murphy?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. It's been a conversation the last few months, at least that I've been here, about what EAF is all about and what eMurf is all about. And you all have asked us at a number of occasions to continue to look at how EAF operates, but also to look at how do we utilize EAF's organization to best serve the city as we continue moving forward. And so we have asked the attorneys to come today and speak to you all about the EAF organization, but not only to speak to you about it, but also what it would look like if we were to change the EAF organization or dissolute the EAF organization as a whole. And so these are the experts. These are the gentlemen who actually were there when EAF was founded. And so they're the right people to ask the questions for you. As you all know, the EAF board as well as the eMurf board are all new people, new directors on city staff. And so we're on a learning curve as well. And through our conversations with these gentlemen as well as with each other, we've decided that it's really going to need your direction and where you want to see EAF and eMurf to go, but mainly really looking at EAF to see how you all want us to operate that, but also if you all want that organization to continue to exist. So with that, I'll give it back over to the attorney.
I don't want to go back over the whole history because I think most of you are familiar with it, that EAF was organized to redevelop a shopping center that was known as Cinderella City. At a time when Cinderella City was going dark, was a white elephant, and had a parking structure that was crumbling and a safety hazard, in addition to which the facility was full of asbestos. So EAF was organized to try and facilitate the redevelopment through private developers. And as a result of that, a parcel was sold to Walmart, which was the economic engine that made the redevelopment possible through the tax revenue that was generated from Walmart. A parcel was sold to Trammell Crow Housing or Residential, which did the apartments. And then another parcel was leased on a long-term lease to a retail developer, which is now Weingarten, which was a large REIT out of Texas, public institution. The one thing that EAF retained was the common areas. It actually owns the common areas, and it also owns this building, which Tom will explain in a moment. So what EAF is doing now is basically managing on behalf of the different stakeholders the common areas, the snow removal, landscaping, if there are any events going on, and it does have some approval rights if a new retail tenant comes in, primarily to make certain that it doesn't conflict with other uses and that it's not encroaching in the common areas that would be adverse to some of the other users. It also formed a partnership with RTD and sold to RTD a number, I believe it was 900, roughly 900, I don't know if that's the exact number, of parking spaces to RTD to facilitate bringing the light rail station here. This was the first light rail station and what is referred to as a transit-oriented development that was done in the city with RTD. And it was also as a result of that sale of those parking units that helped facilitate the ability to make the economics work for the redevelopment. One of the things that was done was there was an extensive parking study done. This was one of the first projects that was done where they looked at parking different uses and different hours. Some of the retail spaces were more evening intensive. Some of the RTD was more daytime intensive. So there was some sharing, and we were able to convince, I wasn't able, but the city was able to convince RTD that even though they had purchased those parking units, that we could reuse them at different hours during the day. So that's essentially what was, as I say today, its primary function is this building, which Tom will explain, management of the common areas, and some oversight in the retail leasing. And that essentially is it. Incidentally, when I say it was ground leased, they actually paid the ground lease up in advance, so they don't make the payments every year. There was a large payment up front as if they were buying the property, but they didn't get a deed and they didn't get title. They got the right to lease it so that the property is still owned by the city, and at the end of the lease period will come back to the city. So I think my partner Steve Rickles was the one who organized the legal structure to allow us to maximize the tax-exempt basis operation, and I'll let Steve comment on that.
Well, there were several different goals involved in determining what structure would be used for EAF and later for eMERV. We wanted a corporate structure to insulate the city from any liability that might flow from primarily the asbestos problem that was, I think, one of the primary motivating factors for the then owner of Cinderella City to transfer it. They wanted out from under that liability also, and were happy to convey the property to the city to get out from under that, but nobody on behalf of the city wanted the city to take on that liability, and so we looked to another corporate structure to facilitate the redevelopment, initially the demolition of the existing structure, all the environmental remediation, and then the redevelopment from there. So we created a Colorado nonprofit corporation to do that. If you look at the organizational documents, this is basically an entity created by the city. When it goes away, any assets come back to the city. We applied to the Internal Revenue Service for recognition of tax-exempt status of the organization, and EAF and later eMERV were recognized as both tax-exempt entities and as what in tax terms is referred to as an integral part of the city of Englewood, which is, as I say, is a tax status, and among the several benefits that come from that are that EAF has essentially similar tax status to the city. It doesn't have to file tax returns, just as the city doesn't have to file returns, things of that sort. So we applied for and obtained rulings from the IRS for both of these entities, recognizing that status. The entities were created so that they were governed by boards of directors that were comprised of staff serving staff of the city, not by individuals but by named positions. And as people in those positions changed, their successors moved into those director slots. Historically, it's been my experience that very little has actually been done by either EAF or eMERV without it being vetted in advance by the City Council, which I think is a natural byproduct of the fact that these entities are governed by city people. So the purposes served by these entities were to insulate the city from liability, but not to create a separation from the city in terms of kind of purpose and function and so on. So in essence, that's the structure that was decided on, and properties were conveyed to these entities, and then the redevelopment went from there.
So then on the financing side, this current facility is encumbered by a mortgage. It's mortgaged to do a financing. The current financing, or the last refinancing for this, the financing of the facility was done in August of last year. And there's about $9,348,000 of principal left. That borrowing is at 2.12%. Council had approved that. And at that time, that borrowing saved the city over $1 million. And so it was like $135,000 a year. That financing will run through 7 more years, 2023. So it'll be paid off in June of 2023. There is, for the city to pay off that financing at this point in time, there would be a prepayment penalty of 3% of the outstanding par amount. So to just kind of do away, if there was ever a decision made to just kind of do away with the financing, just pay it off, that would be the premium, if you will. A little bit about the structure. The structure is a lease purchase, so EAF has the fee interest in the facility. EAF provided that there be a mortgage on the facility, but then the revenue stream to pay that obligation off as a lease with the city. And the reason for that is that lease does not constitute a debt of the city. It's subject to annual appropriation. Very common financing structure for a lot of municipal facilities. So it is a lease purchase. At the end of those 7 years, the city will be conveyed under the documentation the fee interest in this facility. So to undo, I guess, what's done would require that there be transferred the legal interest in the property. It would take consent of the current bondholder, if you will, or financing creditor or lender, which is Key Government Financing. So the good news is there is only, to the extent that there were any modifications or changes to anything, you're not looking at a fractionalized or certificated financing. There's just one creditor at this point in time. But short of it is, you've got 7 years left on the financing and very low interest rate, even for the current market. So that's kind of the status of the financing.
Thank you. Perhaps you could go into if changes would impact financing, or what the impact of changes to structure or those type of things might impact financing.
Right. To actually do a transfer would require the consent of the lender. So that would involve basically a negotiation with the lender. Now, to just pay it off outright, it would be within the control of the city to pay it off outright. But again, that would require then that there be paid the prepayment premium, because there's call protection on behalf of the bank. When they negotiated that rate, they wanted to make sure that the rate was in effect for some period of time. Legally, could it be done? Yes. It would require some lawyering on the documentation side as well.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council? Steve?
Is there any advantage in paying it off early or not paying it off early? And that's one question. Then the other question is it was formed to help protect the city against asbestos issues. Once this whole thing is done, we pay everything off. Is there any reason to keep EAF going because of that?
My understanding is that the asbestos liability is probably behind us. It is not an issue. When you said, is there an impediment to paying it off, or is there any reason to pay it off? There was some discussion that I was involved with or asked about if they wanted to sell the building. And of course, in order to sell the building, you either have to pay the mortgage off, or you have to get the lender to agree to substitute collateral for another city property that would be the equivalent of this property as their collateral. So that would be the problem with paying it off early. It would seem to me that once the financing is paid off, I don't see any major impediment of having EAF collapsed and become transferred back to the city.
Would there be any advantages in continuing with EAF after that point?
That's what I'm saying. I don't see any big advantages of continuing at that point.
Okay.
I don't know if my colleagues think otherwise. Well, yeah, I mean, we do have liability with regard to our manager of the CAM. We did have a slip and fall case that is now pending that EVE has been named in. There also was a environmental hazard. There was a plume that had migrated over to this site from off-site, one of the gas stations, and we had to monitor that, but we did get a no action letter, and I believe that's behind us as well. I haven't looked at it recently, but I haven't heard about it recently either, so I'm assuming that's behind us. I don't see any major liability except, of course, operating the common area. I just think the bottom line is I think it's premature while this financing is in place. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Questions, comments from other council members? Linda?
Can we get a microphone for everybody at some point? Thank you for this information. Is there a way this can be written up so that folks, I think we have different places where we've had history, but could there be a condensed kind of one-pager for citizens to know what this is? I've heard all kinds of bizarre things out when I've talked to folks about what they think this is and some sort of a slush or pass-through or whatever. And I don't think this is a common thing, at least within our city. It's the only one. Is there a way to provide some kind of a
Sure.
short sketch of it? And
One page may be short or
Yeah.
tough order, but
Yeah.
we can certainly write
maybe
it up in a condensed version so that citizens can
Yeah.
read it and hopefully follow it.
And even what you just said in answering Councilmember Yates' questions, I think would be good. Is what happens if we do this? What happens if we do that?
Sure.
Loretta, did you have something?
Well, I guess I'm asking the right people since you guys are the people who set it all up. I assume that you're correct that the liability issue, that whatever the liability was, has been long cleared up since all of the buildings have been rebuilt and everything, that any asbestos and stuff has been taken care of, correct?
I think that's
So that was kind of a moot issue a long time ago. But what the question that I've been asked that I made sure to remember was, when this was set up, who were you protecting the city from? I mean, who was
Well, I don't know if it
who
was a
was
question
the
so much as
asbestos?
protecting. Well, the biggest issue was that the city had in the middle of its city a large shopping center that was a white elephant and was a major problem and was going dark, and the city wanted to see it rejuvenated and redeveloped in some way, and there was a major delta between the cost of doing it and the funds that were available, and so that was one of the main reasons for EVE to be established, was to create this financing. That money was used in part to help facilitate the development, but in terms of liability, what we were trying to shield, as Steve mentioned, was the city from both the environmental problem, the asbestos problem and the gasoline problem that was present, and that was the major liability that we were concerned about at the time.
I appreciate that you'd gone over that previously. What the question that they had asked me was, who were they protecting it from? I mean, I get that we helped to finance so that the development could go through, and so some of that money went to mitigate the additional cost of that. But the city didn't always own Cinderella City. We chose to go into this.
Never owned
in this
never
deal,
owned Cinderella City. It was owned by a private party.
Right.
The private party, it actually had gone through a foreclosure, was owned by, a large part of it was owned by a life insurance company that gave the city $2 million if they would take the deed. And that's the way that occurred. So
I could ask a third time, but I don't think it's going to help me.
I think just try to be responsive to your microphone.
We're on live streaming, so
Sorry. I think there wasn't any way to get from where things were with this deteriorating Cinderella City structure to redevelopment without this large demolition process. And because asbestos was involved, that had to be done in a very careful, extensive, if you've ever seen environmental remediation, everything's enclosed, people are in hazmat suits when they're working on these things, and so the potential liability would have been to anyone in the vicinity of that structure once it started to deteriorate, fall apart, or be demolished. So, I mean, as long as everything was intact, and I'm not an environmental expert, but I think as long as the structure sat there with nothing falling apart or being demolished, the asbestos doesn't create harm to anybody. But as soon as you start tinkering with the structure, things start deteriorating, falling apart, being demolished, and so on, then it's a hazard to anyone nearby.
How much did the city pay to have that done, so that the developers would come in and, feel comfortable?
Well, it
with
didn't only come from the city. Part of the money.
Well, I didn't ask if it only came from the city. I just asked how much did come from the city.
I can't answer that. I don't remember. It was about 15 years ago.
No, I was going to say there's the original financing. I think the documentation, or at least the official statement, was going to be posted on a website called EMMA, Electronic Municipal Market Access. And if you basically just searched for the city of Inglewood, you'd find in that official statement relative expenditures. And I think that did set out some of the breakdown that you're thinking about, so that anybody can access it. It's an open public site with respect to any municipal securities issuances. So that would be a good place to find it. So it's EMMA, Electronic Municipal Market Access, Inc., and just Google or you search for Inglewood.
I was looking for a shortcut since I had the 3 people who helped set it up.
Well, no, I just don't have that number. When was it? 90 something. My memory's just not that good.
$90?
No, probably more than $90. But the other thing I was just going to mention is at that point in time, the market wanted a mortgage on a fee interest. Since that time, we've evolved structures where you hear about lease back. You don't maybe see the use of building authorities or building corps quite as much, but it was prevalent in the 90s, and it was required by the bond insurers, and I believe that first financing was insured by a bond insurer.
I only have 2 other quick questions.
Okay.
I get what you're saying, and I'll look that up if you want. You picked as the finance guy, did you pick the bank you were dealing with?
I'm just a lawyer, so I don't deal with credit issues. The city at the time had a very good investment banker. She's since passed away, but a great person, Vicki Maddox, who at the time was with George K. Baum.
And then the second one was, do you guys, a panel of 3 lawyers, we don't even have that for the city. That's pretty good. So do you guys get paid monthly, or do you just get paid yearly, or how do you get compensated? Are you donating?
To do anything. Keith has been pretty quiet. I don't believe. I was called upon. The city owns some space in the building next door, and they had to release that space. I was called upon to do a lease for that. There was a lease done in this building. I was called upon to do that, and I think essentially that's all that we've done for Keith for quite some time.
And then just what is your charge per hour for Eve? Then since you do it by hour and not by salary, what is your charge per hour to Eve?
My regular rate is $375 an hour,
Okay.
and I charge the city $325 an hour, which is something that we do
just you, or do you each charge separately? Does that include all three of you?
No.
Oh.
I'm talking about if I work on a project, if I have some associates or something, they would obviously be less amount. I don't know.
I was just trying to find out if you all three show up at a meeting, what we're being charged per hour,
I don't
so
think-
that we could
I don't
just.
think the three of us have showed up to the meeting prior to tonight, except once to talk about what needed to be presented to the council here. I haven't met with Tom or with Steve probably several years.
Well, I'm sure you're well worth it. I'm just trying to find out what each of you charge hourly when you for your services for EAF. That's all. I didn't think it was contentious.
Well, my hourly rate is $3.95 an hour.
Okay.
I'd say 95% of the work that I did for EAF was done at the front end in the creation of the entity. And actually, I was not with Berenbaum Weinschenk at that time. I was with a firm called Guthrie and Rickles back then.
Well, otherwise he'd have exception. You're making more than him now, so. And your hourly rate?
On the financing side, I get paid a flat fee when financings are done, so I'm actually tonight free. I don't have a current engagement with the city to do anything when requested to show up. I just do if it's associated with the financing that I've done.
And when you aren't doing the financing part, what is it?
It's normally if I'm charging hourly, but again, usually it's a negotiated fee that's a flat fee when the financing is done. It's $450 an hour.
Thanks. That's all I had.
Thank you, Steve.
I think Rita.
Okay, I
Before
saw
me.
you before, but thank you, Rita.
I'm not exactly sure if I need to ask this question to you. There's a couple questions that I have. Is EAF still under investigation? And if the answer to that is yes, which I believe that it is, does this create a liability for us to do anything in shutting EAF down at this time?
Thank you for asking that question, ma'am. So technically, to be honest with you, EAF was never fully under investigation. The DA's office was given information that I gave them because we were worried about things that everyone was bringing to us, and they have been given that information. I even called and asked if they are under formal investigation prior to this, and they said no. Murphy, again, the city or EAF is not under investigation at this time. If it is, we'll let you know. And that was their last conversation I had with the district attorney's office.
When was that?
That was 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago. But again, they do have the information, and I think they still look at it or doing whatever they are doing. But they can't say if they're going to do anything unless they do something. So.
But they'll let us know whether they're going to do something or not. Do you have any idea when they'll let us know?
They told us if there's something that. Thank you. If there is something that. If there's something that's worth investigating, then they will investigate it. If there isn't, then they will not. That's been the answer that they keep giving me over.
Yeah,
and
but
over.
they might not give us a blanket statement anytime soon that says everything's all good. Yeah.
Exactly. And I've had conversations on, we have business to do here, so if there's anything that we need to know that is interrupting our business, please let us know. And they said, please continue business as usual, as we have not found anything, or not found anything. We have not put a formal investigation to this task yet. So.
Okay, thank you. And then, but with that in mind, if we become under investigation at some point, is there a liability to the city if we shut this down now?
I first answer that because I'm not privy to what the investigation is about. This is the first time hearing it.
So I did ask that same question as well, ma'am, to the district attorney's office, and they said that everything that they are looking at happened prior to what we're doing now. It happened at the onset to EAF, and we're really looking at the whole organization as a whole, and that any business that we're doing now has nothing to do with really what we're doing. They said, please continue business at this time. so that's the answer I continue to get, to be honest, since I gave them the information. Continue to do business. We'll let you know if it's investigated, but it is not an informal investigation.
Thank you. Anything else? Steve?
One last question. This has to deal with the parking spaces. You said about 900 spots is owned by RTD, or they're owned, or are they leased by RTD?
They paid for them. They own them.
So let's say
They shared use.
with a shared use. So I'm assuming that it's the parking garage and the big lot over there, or is it just the big lot?
Both parking garage. You'll see, I forget what it is, 6-hour parking or RTD parking in the garage here. That's their spaces as well as what's over in the big lot.
Okay. So if we were at some date decide to sell the building or use it, lease it out to some other use, how would that parking be affected, or would it be affected?
Whoever the buyer is would have to
Work
take
with-
subject to those leases, subject to those parking spaces.
Okay.
We can't sell them. We don't own them.
Right. So they also pay for the maintenance on the garage over here?
They do pay for the CAM. They contribute towards the CAM expense on a pro rata basis, like the other stakeholders do.
Okay. Thank you.
Lorette?
There keeps being confusion around this, and I'm sorry, but no offense to you, Murphy, but it kind of ends up sounding like a little bit of double talk to people, so I just want to clear it up that the district attorney's office is still reviewing this.
Yes.
Okay. They haven't given it back, and they haven't cleared it. So to what Mayor Jefferson said, they're still reviewing it. They haven't stopped what they're doing. They're, whether you want to, whatever word you want to use for it, but they're still reviewing the information that you provided. My second question would be, I'm a little confused why the attorneys who sit for EAF didn't know that the district attorney was
You have to ask the
reviewing the information for that your organization.
I'll answer that since I don't know the information. I did not think to give the attorneys that represent us the information because, it was actually asked from you all to really look into this and make sure that everything is copacetic, if I may. And so I wanted to move swiftly, and I gave them the information and said, let us know if there's anything criminal. And so...
But, I mean, the attorneys, just like our city attorney, they would be the ones who would be reviewing contracts and looking at interest rates and who we're doing banking with and all of this. Wouldn't they want to know if that's the case? Because it could be that some of their contracts or procedures or things they were doing. Oh, well, you didn't let them know. I guess you didn't let them know.
Well, the reason, I mean,
Surprise.
I think you hit the nail on the head when you asked what their hourly rates were, ma'am. If I called them and asked them for a meeting to review documents in which they really had no control over, I'm not sure it'd be worth the time or the money.
Oh, no, that's not what I was asking. I mean, the review that the district attorney is doing, some of that review is over contracts and procedures and things that were done within the maintenance of the building and the procedure of the building. And that organization had 3 attorneys overlooking it, and so they might have wanted to know. If I was them, I probably would have wanted to know, but I'm not them. So
You want to know?
Sorry.
I don't believe that I've ever reviewed a contract from relating to the maintenance, whether it's the parking people doing the parking, the snow removal, or the landscaping. I don't recall ever seeing one of those contracts.
Question for me. You were talking about the prepayment penalty, I believe, that EAF would be subject to. It was 3%, is that correct? And so, any real substantial changes in structure here and we'd be subject to that 3%? Is there a way to avoid that if council or the city decided, hey, we wanted to maintain that line of mortgage or whatever and transfer it to the city or something?
Yeah, Mike had mentioned the substitution of property. I mean, you could negotiate with the lender to substitute a property, and that would be an example.
And they might be open to that, do you think?
Could
That's
be.
a possibility. Eric, what are our decisions from here?
Mayor and Council, I think at this point in time, the membership of the EAF Board and EMERF had been asked by City Council to bring forth alternatives and or education about what to do with the two entities. Specifically, we're dealing with EAF right now. I think after you've now heard from the experts who've created EAF and who have told you what it would take to unwind it, this council is going to have to make some decisions. Specifically, what you didn't discuss tonight was the polity or the governance of the EAF Board. You know, currently, as Mr. Miller enunciated, it's by position in the city, 3 positions. If you were to decide to change that governance, that certainly could be done, but that's a question that no one asked tonight, so I'll throw that out perhaps just for these gentlemen to answer. But I think the staff, your staff right now, who serves in dual capacity in their roles as city staff and then serving on the board, have a level of discomfort with that because of questions that have been asked, because of accusations of impropriety of the previous incumbents of those roles. And they said, we don't want to have this because they don't want the personal liability. I think the attorneys have enunciated that they wouldn't have personal liability for decisions that are made because there's some sort of policy that covers them. However, you as a council need to give EAF and EMERF clear direction as to where you want to see them to proceed in the future, understanding the pros and cons of doing so, either dissolving or remaining in place.
Do you feel like it's operating currently efficiently? Are we getting a good deal on cam maintenance, those type of things from an operational perspective in your mind?
I've looked at cam rates just to prepare for this, again, because I'm not on the EAF board, and those cam rates seem pretty reasonable compared to what I used to manage in other areas of the country. However, I can't answer whether or not it's completely functional. With respect to the agreements, I think that's something that you'd have to hear from the EAF board itself. The only thing I wish they would do is, go competitive every now and then with their vendors who provide the services.
And I'm not on the EAF board as either. I'm on the EMERF board, but I will tell you that I know the EAF board has taken steps to go competitive for the services that they have, and they are doing that as we speak. And so that is a something that I know you all have asked for, something I've asked them to do, and so they're definitely doing that as we speak. But I will tell you, to reiterate what the city manager said, I know that the board members, the employees, feel uncomfortable being on these boards. Namely, being that they have to present to you all, we have to present to you all a number of different things during different topics when we're presenting. And should you all in any way feel that we're being not objective or partial to one or the other decisions that we're making, especially when it comes to something that has to do with EAF or EMERF, that makes us feel uncomfortable because our job is to give you facts and let you make the decisions. And so I just want you all to know that's among a lot of the conversations, in that those boards, the people on those boards, feel uncomfortable being on those boards.
Linda?
I appreciate your saying that. I've not been one who's been uncomfortable with the way it's been set up, and particularly since I've looked at a couple in other cities. It does seem like things have changed over time in terms of the way these are put together currently. So I guess knowing that you are uncomfortable, other staff are uncomfortable, what could we do differently to make it so that it's not run the way it is, but still intact through our 2023 commitment? Are there other options we could move toward for leadership of it? Is there another way to do it now that it's already set like this?
Well, your city manager, I don't think that you can collapse the entity without running a problem with the existing financing. I think that's a given. So the question is, as city manager mentioned, would be the governance. And frankly, I don't have any suggestions for you in terms of governance. It was always thought that staff people who frankly served at the pleasure of the council, and that, as Steve mentioned, I don't believe any transaction took place, whether it was the ground lease. EAF is a totally different animal than EMERF. We'll get into it. was done without, number one, vetting with the council, and then asking for a resolution supporting whatever action they were proposing, so as to make certain the council had oversight of what was going on. And other than that, I don't have any options to suggest to you. I'm sorry.
Okay, that's helpful. In the past, I'd never felt like we were in a bad place with our staff doing it. It just came up more recently because of the case that you submitted for someone to take a look at outside of ourselves to have an objective perspective. I feel really badly now that you all don't feel comfortable, but I mean, we could fire any one of you and say we're going to run this with someone else doing it because we didn't trust what you did. So how could we rebuild trust if we have to continue in this way? What would do that for you?
And I will share with you, ma'am, I appreciate that. I will share with you that I think, to be transparent and honest with you, I think most of it is not the actual business that's being conducted, but it's the perception of business. And if any one of you says one thing about, what if they're doing this with this board, or, not feeling that we're transparent with what we're doing with either one of those organizations, that means there's an idea that we're not running the city or its entities correctly, and that's what there's a problem with. If there wasn't any of those allegations out there floating around, or if there wasn't a problem politically with this, I think that we'd be okay. But I think that because of the history around this and because of all the talk about how it's been run, it kind of undermines our objectivity as staff, but also undermines the decisions that we come to you that may not even have to do with Eve or eMurph, but if it's in someone's mind that we're running that organization with ill intent, all the other decisions that we're making for the city, we would think that would have something to do with it as well. So it's really a political and trust issue.
Maybe it's on us to figure out how do we help it be as transparent as we need it to be. And my hunch is you'll all be fine because we're asking you to do this. So maybe it's on us to figure out how do we make sure we're getting all the information, things are posted correctly, and all that kind of stuff, so that they're not stuck in a place where they're in between.
Steve?
Well, first of all, I'd like to state that none of us on council has the ability to hire or fire any staff member except for the city manager and the city attorney. And I would say that we have trust in our city manager to make sure that anything that he's responsible for is being well looked at. And I do agree that council, when we're out there in the community, that if we don't have solid facts to back up what we're saying, especially when it comes to issues such as this, we shouldn't be saying it, because it's just rumor and gossip at that point in time. So that's, and frankly, I don't think it's worth our while to change the structure because of the cost and the fact that we've got financing already in place for this building, and we potentially could disrupt that financing and cause a huge mess for our community.
Thanks, Steve. Brett?
Regardless of what the structure is, maybe I could shed some light on this. You have people in this room, including myself, that had done open records request on information regarding Eve. And we were told that through their legal counsel, I assume that's the panel sitting in front of me here, that they were a private entity and that they were not bound by that. And we were unable to get any information regarding what really ends up being an asset of the city and that the citizens own. And so that did create a lot of concern about how it was being handled and what was going on. That didn't come to some discussion from council until December or January, when all of this happened. And once the books were asked to be looked at, it was within a week they were turned over to the district attorney, not by this council, but by the city manager and the assistant city manager. council has not seen those books. They were turned over within a few days to that. So the concern about that, whether it's staff or whether it's another private entity or we change it over, would be, of course, that it's being touted as a separate organization that isn't under the same kind of transparency rules. And I'm sure that you gave them good legal advice at the time, but that's what kind of created that lack of trust and transparency, was that when questions were asked by citizens to find out, they couldn't. So even if we changed it, we'd have to come to some determination on the level of transparency that we would need to have, whether it was another board or staff or hired or somebody else. But hopefully that gives you a little insight as to why some of the concerns were brought up from the beginning.
Can't respond to things in the abstract I don't have in front of me, but I can tell you that our advice is that EAF is subject to the open records rule, that we have produced records on request to a number of different people, including litigants, concerned citizens, etc. So unless I saw what you're specifically referring to, I can't really respond. Now, there are times when either the request is not made in accordance with the statute, or the statute has a number of things which are not open to open records that apply to every city and every organization. So I don't know what those specific were, but I can tell you unreservedly that in our view, EAF is subject to the open records rule, and that if a proper request for records were made, they would be produced, or our advice would be to produce them.
Well, that's something that's kind of changed, because I'm pretty good at doing open records requests, but and we have our former assistant city manager, including Murphy, might have been misunderstanding that. So some of the board members have made it very clear publicly on the record that they were not. But recently that changed. But I did that as an explanation. That's the reality of the situation. That's what people were told. They were refused that information. So that's just where some of that mistrust and lack of transparency came.
If I may do one point of correction, the finances in December were sent to all the council members when that was requested.
Mm-hmm.
I can't say what people did or what the former assistant city manager did, but when it was requested to me personally, I made sure that the council had that information.
Right. I was just pointing out that the financial information came available to council only after it had already been turned over to the district attorney.
Oh, okay.
Right. And do we need more chairs for the police? I'm getting a little nervous.
What'd we do? I don't know. We didn't do anything, we promise. Okay, other comments or questions from council? I suppose, at this point I'd like to take some direction on, directing staff. Do we need some additional information? Do we need, my personal feeling is that, we do need an answer ultimately to, the financing unraveling, if that would cause major problems. My biggest thing is transparency and efficiency of operations. It sounds like both of those issues are being addressed, and so I feel like we're handling that. And I could live with the current structure as long as we had additional transparency and additional efficiency in the operation. Others want to comment there? If you don't mind, maybe we'll do round robin on this one, so we can try to move to the next item. Is it you gentlemen for the eMurf discussion as well?
I think it's me.
Yeah. Okay.
Tom.
Okay, but some of the gentlemen will exit because we are running a little bit long here. And
Can I ask you just a question on what you just said?
What?
You said there were two things you wanted. One was more transparency and more efficiency. So you think both of those have already been met? Or you're saying
I think that staff is telling us that they've heard us on that, and that there are some changes. It sounds like they're going to do some bidding. It sounds like they're posting their records online, and so that's
I
my
wanted the
subjective
public to
opinion,
know what's
I
been
suppose.
done, because we haven't gotten very specific in this conversation. So I want to know exactly what's been done, because I do think the posting was a big deal that I think Councilor Barentine brought up nicely months ago, and the bidding is the other thing that got put in for this investigation piece that people are praying, what the heck are they talking about? We're being very oblique in our conversation tonight.
Well, and from my perspective, I would like to see those memorialized in some form of a policy so that, we can ensure that that will continue.
Councilmember Olson is correct. They did have their first public meeting. They did notice it. I was in attendance along with some other people. They did vote. It was a very short meeting, but they did vote to start doing requests for proposals and formalize that. I believe that it was recorded. Allison was there, and that it's made public, and that they'll have minutes. Previously, some of the questions that council members had, like when EAF met and decided to do this, and then there were really no minutes of those meetings. So we really can't kind of go back and do that, but they did have their first meeting. I understand they had another one. I wish it was noticed a little longer, but it was on a Monday at 8 o'clock in the morning, and it didn't get noticed till, Thursday evening, but they have had it. They have started it.
And so again, I guess I'll do a round robin at this point and ask council members to weigh in. Again, my preference is to probably to stick with this structure, since there probably will be some, at minimum, transactional cost for, effectively moving our financing. And so I guess I would like to see some policy language come forward that addresses those two concerns. Rick, you want to weigh in on this?
I would agree with the same. I would hope that this council would not micromanage EVE, and that we would let them know what we need, and they would go do what we need, and have transparent reports of what they're doing. And I think that's all we've asked for, and that's where I'd like to go.
Rita?
And I do not want to be part of the finance.
I actually agree with that. I would like to keep it intact the way it is, and but just to make sure that there is openness and transparency, and as long as that happens, I believe there, and I'm not saying the trust issue comes with the current staff, but when trust is broken, then it has to be rebuilt, regardless of where the issue began. But I am happy to leave it the way it is with guaranteed openness and transparency.
Thank you, Amy.
I agree we should leave it as it is for now, but I like Councilmember Olson's suggestion of if there are things that we could provide that would make it better or easier or more efficient for the boards of these groups, then we should absolutely figure out what that is and provide that to make everyone more comfortable. Because I don't want to risk a big change in the financing either.
Linda?
I feel good about where it's come so far, and I think there's been a long history in the I don't know, since Rick and I have been on anyway, I think, where we were in meetings where there wasn't even recordings going on, and we've gotten up to a 21st century council and operating with a much better process for keeping things. And I think this one got caught. They're like EAF and EMERF. We just don't, so they've just been out there on the side. So it's good. We've brought this up. It's come to light, making changes. I feel very good about it, so I'm ready to go forward with the way it is.
Thank you, Steve.
I would like to keep it as is right now. I'd also like to say to staff that since they've made these changes, they've done a great job, and that they, I would say, they're working well within the interest of the city, and they deserve some trust from council.
Sorry, quickly, with Steve and Linda, are you guys supporting any language coming forward for, transparency and bidding type of processes, or are you just comfortable with current status quo?
I'm always for transparency.
Okay. Just double
so
checking.
Absolutely, there should be postings of meetings. There should be record of it. I want to do everything we can to support you, so you feel like we support you. Okay. So if there's anything else you think we could be asking you to do that would make it open and transparent, let us know, because we can put those into the public realm as well. So
thank you. Just double checking. Just want to make sure we had consensus on that.
When it comes to transparency, it's always about transparency. We are a public organization, and I'm sorry I didn't state that earlier, but the way that they've moved forward in making things transparent, they've done a great job, and that's well within the concerns of the public and in the public interest. So,
Thank you,
yes, if we need to make a statement, transparency, then we do.
Thank you. Lorette?
My concern is that this issue was not brought up by council. as Eric rightfully stated earlier, it was brought up by the EAF board, who are uncomfortable with what they're doing. We could ask questions why the panel went ahead and set it up where it originally, but the staff was quite comfortable doing it for, 17 years, 15 years? I mean, it's been a long time. So now the staff isn't comfortable. It wasn't council that brought this up about potentially doing this. It actually came from EAF, not us. So I'm not sure that we're being respectful to the concerns that the staff have in the setup of this organization that are making them uncomfortable. Murphy mentioned it as well, that they have to bring things to us that they think they're playing a dual role. Now all of a sudden they're the director of Public Works, and now they're the board of EAF, and they're telling us what their decision is on how to handle an asset that's in this community. So they're the ones who came to us. We didn't go to them and say we would like to have this dissolved. They were the ones who were uncomfortable. So I think we need to give a little bit more respect to that concern.
Guys, would you like to respond to that? I mean, is it capable of functioning moving forward, or are we at a spot where you guys are recommending dissolution?
Wow, that's a very hard question to answer after hearing all of you and what you would like to do. I will tell you that I think Councilmember Barentine is correct, though, that as we move forward, I think that this is a big decision, because I think as we move forward, it's easy tonight to say, oh, let's just do it the way we've always done it and let's bring transparency. But I think as soon as we bring to you all a land deal and we said, yeah, we would negotiated this, on behalf of EAF, and, this is what we like to do with the building because of the dilapidated structure, whatever have you, and we did that as the EAF board, you all are going to be, you have a right to question what we're doing there. And so, also said, one thing that we've done and that I've heard that they've always done is bring the decisions to the council before anything happens. In my mind, why do we have that middleman? We can just as well, this staff will be doing it as staff, even if you decided to get rid of the organization itself. Only we would have one job, and that would be to be staff. So I do stand with the idea and the conversations that I've had with the EAF board, and today I'm speaking on behalf of them, but that they are uncomfortable being on those boards because of that dual role. But we'll respect your decision should you decide to keep these boards. That is just fine. But with that decision, please understand the complexity of the person's job that is in that role, in that it's not part of their job description, and also that when they're handling the business of EAF, they are doing it on behalf of you all. And so they're doing it with the best intentions. And I can't speak to whatever happened before, and I'm assuming that they did it with the best intentions as well. But it's a very complex issue, but I do believe that they are quite uncomfortable at this time.
Rita.
Actually, I think we have the information from the founders regarding EAF. I do think that this is something that we probably need to discuss in more detail among us. So I think perhaps we should schedule another study session on this so we could go over that aspect of it.
Would other members be supportive of that? Yes. I'm seeing a lot of heads sort of nodding. I think that at that point we would need an answer to the financing issue and whether the bank would be okay with it and how much, at minimum, at a ballpark of what this sort of transition would be costing us as an organization. Steve?
Nodding yes or no for another.
Nodding yes.
Yes for it.
Yeah, that's what I saw over here. Yes.
So we have a consensus?
I believe so, yes. Would you like to weigh in? I mean, you're welcome to weigh in.
Curious, that's all. It's just I didn't know which way you were talking.
Yeah. I think we're good there. Okay, it is coming a little after 7. We're way past our schedule here. I know we have another guest from Mile High Public Affairs, as well as all the folks with guns in the room. Do we want to move on to item 4, or do we want to?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go ahead and do that then. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here tonight. That was very helpful and informative. Let's move on to agenda item 4. That is police department facility discussion. John Burtz and Steve Welchert from Mile High Public Affairs are present. Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening.
Well, I bring
Sorry,
you good
given the
news
time,
this
please
evening.
just jump into it.
I want to be cognizant and respectful of everybody's time, so I think I'm going to jump right into the survey and give you a report and give you a chance to answer some questions. We have a presentation that you can all review at your own time, but I will tell you, I've been doing this for a very long time, as you know from our presentation of a couple of weeks ago. My ex-partner and I, who are partnered again on this particular project, are here on behalf of Frederick Polls this evening. We did not conduct the poll, but we're here to report the actual results. Incredibly positive results. The fact that 70% of your population sees the right track in terms of how things are going on in this community right now is phenomenal. It was only 10% on the wrong track in actual poll itself. When you take a look at not only the economy, the fact that property values are going up, that there's a secondary item there around property values, and that is property taxes. And one of the items that we were somewhat skeptical in taking a look at the polling results itself is whether or not property taxes would be a negative. And actually, in this particular community, it's not so much a negative. Actually, 50% or greater than 50%, I think, of your survey itself are actually supportive of property taxes currently where they're being at. Are you going to be able to put it up on the... Okay. I apologize that we're rushing through this, but I'm trying to be respectful of your time this evening.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
You have to turn off
Right.
just a light or two to get the clarity.
So once again, we did a 300 sample. Margin of error was 5.6%. We were able to complete the survey over a 4-night period of time. As you can see, party affiliation breakouts are as follows on the bottom of the slide there. Let's go to the second slide. Great news, as I mentioned. The Inglewood electorate is very positive and supportive of the tax increase ballot issue because of the positives. City direction, quality of life, job performance of your police, and frankly, the impact of growth. They really see growth as an excellent item in this community, and they're very supportive of what you've been doing as a city and making the city grow. Only a few are aware of the discussion about a police building. 63%, right out of the box, were supportive of a $27 million bond issue. Now, no, a poll itself is a mini public relations or political campaign. You go through it, you ask questions about whether or not they're supportive of the concept in general, you take a look at the pros and the cons, and then you ask it again. And we asked the question again in a very interesting way, as you'll see here in a moment as we conclude the presentation in the last slide. Let's go to the next slide. As I mentioned right at the get-go, 69% of your electorate sees this city being on the right track at this point in time. Only 10%. I mean, 7 to 1. I mean, that's a phenomenal number. Colorado right now, as Steve will tell you, was at about a 60-40 clip, positive to negative ratio. I can tell you I did this in the city of Aurora real recently on the bond issue there for the schools. It was about 60-30 positive. I mean, I was quite surprised to see such a positive feel about your community and the direction you're moving in. Next slide. Voter mood, we wanted to take a look at, how people take a look at your park and rec system, how they take a look at the Inglewood Police, as well as the overall quality of life. As you can see from these numbers, 88% were positive in terms of your park and rec facilities, 85% in terms of the job performance of the police department, and once again, 89% in the overall quality of life. As you can see, these were across partisan divisions. There weren't any particular breakouts one way or another in terms of Republicans or Democrats. In a couple of cases, actually, Republicans were actually more supportive. The interesting thing about this particular graph is the strength of these individual supports at 59%, 58%, 50%. These are numbers in a lot of polling that we've seen around the state over the last 20, 30 years were the high end. They were the combined numbers. The fact that you're at 59% positive on your park and rec facilities, 58% positive for the job the police department is doing, these are phenomenally supportive numbers. And I think give you a general sense of how people are feeling about the services that are going on in your community. Next slide. We also wanted to take a look at one of the questions that the city wanted to look at was the fire department and how they were doing at this point in time. And we split sampled this particular question. We asked 150 people the question one way. We asked 150 people the question another way. And we inserted the word Denver into the question itself. We wanted to see how response times, how people felt about being protected by the fire department. And as you can see, 62% were positive. Just hearing about the fire department, or is that, yeah, fire department, 63% with the Denver Fire Department, but very 1% and very 50% very on the other one as well. Again, very, very strong numbers. But interestingly enough, real important to point out, this is really, really fascinating to both Steve and I. Usually these are flip numbers for police and fire. Everybody loves firefighters. They're the ones that, you know, do the calendars and rescue kittens out of trees and are there when in time of need. These numbers are flip on this police department. They're obviously doing a really good job, and the fact that, you know, the rest of this poll is also going to support that. It's a phenomenal testimonial to the work that they do on a day-to-day basis. Next slide. So we wanted to take a look at growth in property values because, you know, as we all know, we were in a depression or a recession for a period of time, and now all of a sudden we're seeing a real upswing in property values, and want to know how people feel about that because, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's this flip side to that album. The flip side is with higher property values, you also have higher property taxes. They see that, you know, the property values going up as a generally incredibly strong thing. It's 73% support. As you look across the board there at the demographic breaks out, 80% for Democrats, 71 for Republicans, 66 for unaffiliated. Age groups don't matter. They are very invested in the fact that their property values are going up. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not wearing my reading glasses. So the growth one is actually at the top, and the property values are below at 66%.
Even the Republicans are a couple points higher than Democrats in property values. That's strong.
Any questions on that slide? Because I think that's an important slide to look at. Next slide. Voter mood on taxes. Again, I referenced some of this before. The fact that taxes are too high or about right in terms of their level right now. 33% thinks taxes are too high. 54% that taxes are just about right. You know, I really attribute that to the fact that you've been pretty frugal as a community. You haven't gone forward with a lot of bond or mill levy overrides in the past. They understand the need that your police department truly does need to be, you know, taken care of for the job that they're doing. And you know, they're in an environment right now that they want to take care of the items that you believe, that the city believes, need to be taken care of. And the fact that, you know, you're seeing almost a 21-point difference in about right versus too high, again, these are numbers we haven't seen in a long, long time. Again, across the board, Republicans, Democrats, unaffiliated, age groups, they're all saying taxes are about right now. Next slide. We also wanted to take a look at what was going on in the school taxes. And let me stay right up front. This is not about any individual school district. We didn't ask about Cherry Creek. We didn't ask about Sheridan. We didn't ask about Inglewood. We just asked about if a bond issue for schools was on the ballot, how would you vote on that particular issue? So you can see it right out of the box, 52% support, 37% opposed. The only group that truly does show strong opposition to that is the Republican base at this point in time. But let me reiterate, this is not, we didn't run the campaign like we ran the campaign for your issues, taking a look at the different complexities of your issues. This was just a first blush approach. Next. We wanted to find out how many people actually knew about the police building issues, and as you can see, 87% don't know anything about it. We asked the 14% of the people that responded that they know something about the poll itself to have an open-ended chance to respond. And as you can read to the right, there were various answers, some quite informed, others that were kind of generally, posed in dealing with the fact that, well, we're hearing that there are leaky roofs. Well, we're hearing there's overcrowding. Maybe there's issues with victims. Whatever the case may be, those were the open-ended responses at the right. So even though that we're seeing a lot of support for the police and the desire to support a particular issue, you would have to actually get out and do some campaigning around this issue to sell it. This is not something you just put on the ballot and let it go. You actually have to educate your electorate about the needs here. But once they learn about the needs, they come very quickly over to the yes column. Next slide. Again, this is what we referenced right at the beginning of the poll. We talked, this is the head-to-head question on the ballot issue itself at 63% yes, 25% no. As you can see, again, party affiliation is pretty balanced, 66 for Democrats, 63 for Republicans. Age groups, some of the interesting things here is even the older voters are incredibly supportive. They're the ones that are most tax sensitive usually in communities. They understand the need to support their police department, and this is the chance to do it. Next. Police building. These are testing the positive and messaging around the issue itself. And I'm going to actually have to put my glasses on this thing because I can't read. The first issue, of course, we wanted to look at the leaky roofs, and which has been resulting in the damage and loss of evidence. And as you can see, 81% combined, positive to somewhat positive, see that as an important issue to be supportive of this particular ballot issue. The police department, having the issue of victims and perpetrators being in the general vicinity in that building, 77% support on that particular issue. The fact that the police building was built in 1972, before the internet, before any of the modern, entities that are involved in current policing, current law enforcement, at 78% support. A new headquarters allows the city to have tools such as more holding cells, taking care of that issue, at 81% support. As you can see, all of these issues are polling plus 70. And in our discussions, Steve and I's discussions, I'm doing a lot of this, so is Steve and other communities around Colorado. These messages are the strongest positive messages I have seen in any community in this election cycle. Phenomenal.
Your lowest here, 71%, is often many cities' highest, so it's really phenomenal. The other thing that you need to point out is the two blue bars show you intensity, right? So the top one is 81% support, but 61% is definitely and 20% is probably. So that tells you a level of intensity. You don't want to just kind of say, is it a good reason to get a new police building? It's definitely a good reason. So that shows you that there's intensity behind the issue, and that's why they're ranked in that order.
Let's go to the final slide. And before we talk about the final slide, I want to give a little bit of a pre-discussion about this. We wanted to find out whether or not giving voters in your community the chance to give their opinion through the ballot box was important, or whether or not it was important to proceed doing this in another way that didn't allow for a tax increase, that didn't require a public vote. And I think it's important to point out here that we have gotten into an environment in the state of Colorado where voters want their voices heard. It's very, very clear. We've been running campaigns all over the state of Colorado for the last 25 plus years asking voters for their input on increasing taxes. That's precisely what we asked in this question. Would you rather have the ability to vote on a $27 million bond issue, or would you rather have the city proceed with doing an issue with no tax increase, let me point that out, and no public vote? 2-1. Give me the chance to vote on a $27 million bond issue. Incredibly strong, over the top strong. So in conclusion, after seeing this poll, taking a look at it, digesting it, going back and forth over it over the last 3 or 4 days, we highly recommend that you proceed with a $27 million bond issue this year to build a new police station in this community. These numbers are phenomenal. Opportunity is knocking, Council. It really is. And it's not knocking, it's kicking the door down. And you have to answer it. Your voters are asking for the chance to vote on this issue. The messages are there. They support their police department. It seems like a bit of a no-brainer. Any questions?
Questions from council?
Will we get a copy?
Excellent. I think I got a question for Eric, and that is, how good do you feel about the plan? You know, I mean, we've heard, you know, we've got a fairly wide range of what we need, and you know, do we feel like we can nail that down to specify exactly what we need here with the time frame?
Absolutely. I think that's definitely part of what direction we'd be seeking tonight, Council, but I think that certainly can be done. I think you have framework that's already been done by Jones Lang LaSalle, work that's been done by your Public Works Department over the past several years, which was in part of your council request for this last week. I think we have enough information here to go forth and look at a design, through a design build process. I believe that if, in fact, the council decided to tell us to go, much of that work could be done and tightened up fairly quickly.
Linda?
I don't think I have any questions. I'm kind of stunned at it all. It's higher than I thought it would be. I mean, I thought it was going to be in the 60s, but to have that kind of 70s for some of that stuff is really great. But I wanted to say thank you to all of those in the room who are being addressed in this survey, because you have made this community really believe in us all. And it's not, I mean, in this day and age, you know what's going on. You're the ones that are putting up with all kinds of media scrutiny and difficulties. So I want to thank you for coming tonight, too, because I don't know that we expected this, but thank you for being here. So, and maybe it made people a little nervous that you're here, but I actually said to your guy over here, I said, I'm getting a little nervous that no one's showing up, because when we did this with fire, the room was kind of packed. Of course, it was a little different kind of situation. We were kind of, but thank you for coming. And I don't feel intimidated by it. Instead, what I'm very excited that you're here to want to know what we're going to do next. And I'm like, I'll withdraw my little chart thing if we have to move forward on this. But if we do a chart next week, I really do want to see apples to apples on this. And if we're going to have another option presented, there has to be an RFP. And I'm just not really supportive of that process, but there has to be an RFP. We cannot just have people coming here out of the blue and presenting us why they should take on this project. So thank you for this work. It's very exciting to see this.
I got Eric and then Rick.
Actually, Mayor,
And Lorette.
we've got Officer Dirk Smith, who's with the union. I'd like to have him make a couple comments if that's okay with council.
Sure.
Thanks for having me, giving me the opportunity to speak to you guys tonight about this. From an employee's point of view on the topic of this new building, I'd like to say that this building is a tool that we're provided with to give us the opportunity to serve our mission of serving the community. And it's not just a matter of having an outdated building over there. It affects our public health and safety of our employees, as well as our ability to accomplish that mission of serving the community. Several of the deficiencies in that building were outlined clearly in the survey, and beyond those, there's other issues that weren't really addressed because it wasn't really an issue of the accomplishment of our mission. The safety of our employees over there with the mold, the environment over there of the building is a concern to us as employees, and the parking lot situation where our police vehicles and our employee vehicles are exposed to the public. There's no protection for those, and we've had several incidents, within dozens of incidents of employee vehicles being tampered with over there. And so I'd like to let you know, as an employee and a representative of our employees, that we will fully support the council in pursuing a ballot initiative here for this new building. So thank you.
Thank you. Turn it over to Rick and then Lorette.
I want to thank the gentleman for bringing this forward. I can't wait to share that with my folks as well. I'm sending that information on. And I'd just like to say I'm in support of staff moving forward and getting a bond, language and information for us, because time is sensitive. We are in need, and I would prefer that we just move ahead and we're not voting, obviously, but I'd prefer that we, as council, would give staff direction to continue to move forward on working on a bond so that our voters can vote. That's what my district has asked for as well, to please let them have a vote in this. Thank you.
Brett?
In the interest of time, I mean, since we're running late, for the voters voting on it, I'll save the rest of my comments.
You're for the voters voting for it? Is that what you said? Yes. Steve?
I think it's important that we go ahead and proceed with this. And I have to say this, these numbers are outstanding on how the community feels about our police officers and the quality of their work. And you guys, fantastic job. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we've got some direction to move forward to bring this forward to council in our next meeting here. We might want to make some room in our next study session, perhaps, for what you come forward with as far as designs and those type of things. I really want to make sure we've got our arms around what we're funding here. Other questions or comments? Eric, I did want to ask you a little bit about the agenda item we skipped over with eMRF. We had attorneys here. I just want to make sure you got your arms around whatever the issues were. Perhaps you could lead the discussion on that issue next time.
Before they leave for just a minute, can I say one more thing?
Sure.
For next week, I mean, would they be available next week too, in case we need any further clarifications? If we're going to do more study and figure out some of this, these folks, or maybe our finance guys too back here, is that who you'd get in the room?
For what now?
If we're going to continue, if we're going to hammer it out next week, will it just be us, or will we have these folks in case we need to ask questions?
I thought they were just doing the part whether we were going to do it or not hammering it.
Yeah,
Okay,
I don't
so
know if
we're
they
not
need to be
gonna go
present.
back. Good.
We'll
Okay,
discuss
that's
this at
great
mayor
to
manager
know.
meeting. We'll make a decision, making sure that council's got adequate information to be able to move forward on this issue. Any further questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting. We'll pick this up in about 5 minutes next door, okay? Thank you, everyone.
Come back there.